that we might be able to answer tonight, please keep in mind that these plans are really flexible and need to be nimble because we are moving in and out of new information on a daily basis. So we have to sometimes go back, tweak our plan, and that will probably continue into the school year and beyond. So understanding that not everything will remain solid, but we'll do our best to provide as much information and some of the big pieces that we know will continue. I wanted to give you a quick update on timeline. Our building implementation plans will be made public on August 7th. That happens shortly before the board meeting that we have on August 10th. And on August 10th, I will make a recommendation to the school board for what mode of learning we will start the school year in. Understanding that that recommendation will come from the metrics that are being developed. So I am working closely with Mary Greeley, with Story County Emergency Management and Story County Public Health, as well as all of our Story County superintendents. And our goal is to develop that metric system that will be used by all of the school districts in Story County. And then based on those metrics, that's how I will make that recommendation to the school district. And I know that August 10th seems late, but our goal is to have it be as close to school starting as we can because we want to have the most accurate information at the time. As you have probably already seen, cases fluctuate day to day. And so we want to have really accurate information when we make that recommendation to the school board. So following that August 10th meeting, our buildings will hold building level specific meetings on the 11th through the 13th. And so we will do those in the same format that this is in. It'll be a Zoom meeting, but it'll be specific to the building. Some of you have multiple students in other buildings, and so we will make sure that we've got those times staggered so that you're able to attend different buildings as well. Again, so August 7th, implementation plans will be released, building specific ones, and then a recommendation to the board on August 10th, and then the 11th through the 13th will be the building level meetings. The final date to kind of note is August 17th. On August 17th, we will have the requests for online learning due. And what that is, you will have an option as a parent if you feel that the best learning mode for your child is in that online environment for whatever family reasons or personal reasons you have. We want you to know we support that, and we will take those requests up until August 17th. Though there's two different forms that you'll want to note. The first form for those recommendations is a medical form. So if your child is in need of having the online learning environment for medical reasons, we'll ask that you fill out that medical one. You'll upload the doctor's letter or note into Infinite Campus, but the form itself will be a Google form that will be available on our website. If it's for a personal reason, there's a parental request, and that's a different form. Same information, they're titled different, and that's just to help us keep those separate. And again, that's due on August 17th. One of the questions that I know will come up, are students able and parents able to move to a different learning mode if they start the year? So for example, I start the year, let's say we're in a hybrid mode, and my child's going in a hybrid mode, will I be able to then later move to an online learning mode? And the answer is yes, absolutely. You are the expert for your child and your child's education, and our goal is to support you. We are not trying to sell you on this is the best environment, or this isn't the best environment. That is your expertise as a parent to know. And our job is really to help support and educate your child in whatever learning mode you feel is best. So we would definitely take those into consideration after the fact. And the same is true if your child starts in an online mode and you decide we need to move to whatever mode the on-site mode might be. You're able to do that. Um, the other thing I just want to point out is just a quick thank you to all of our staff. We had about 150 staff members participate in the development of our overarching Return to Learn plan. And so that I just am super impressed with that, and the amount of work that was done and the quality of work was just outstanding. So a thank you to our staff and to our leaders for that. And at this time, we will turn it back to Eric, and then we'll go into some overview as well.
Thank you, Superintendent Reisner. We're going to take a quick second. I want to thank everyone who has submitted thoughts through the thought exchange. We're going to move away from this screen right now, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to point out where we can find information on our website. So if you go to ames.k12.ia.us, or if you just Google the Ames Community School District, I'm sure many of you have been to our website before. We do have Return to Learn information prominently displayed on our homepage. I do want to point out a few things on here right away. One is all of our email communications that will go to parents. We're going to archive them all under the News tab right here. Additionally, this is where you can find our plan right now. So right here is our district Return to Learn plan. It is a fluid document. It will probably be updated and it will change over time, but this is where that can be found. And then also, here's the timeline that Superintendent Reisner referred to a little bit ago. So we are updating. So right here is the Zoom credentials for this meeting, but we have outlined several other key dates that are coming up that Superintendent Reisner talked about, including the building specific webinars that will take place August 11th through August 13th. And you can join via Zoom. We've set up those credentials already. So if we are going to email all of these credentials to parents as well, but in case that email gets lost, completely understand that, but all of those can be found here on our website. Additionally, we are going to continue to build a frequently asked questions page. And one other thing, and we're going to talk about it more tonight, Superintendent Reisner did talk about it a bit, but each building, in addition to having their own webinar, is going to have, building specific information. And so we will also be putting that onto our website as well. At this point, we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to let the building administrators from Ames Middle School and Ames High School talk. So first I want to introduce Jonas Michael, and he'll have a few words and can introduce his team. And then we're going to go to our Ames High principal, Valerie Nyberg. Jonas, you are up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonas Michael. I'm the principal of Ames Middle School. And we will do introductions. I believe there's a few of my associate principals in the chat. So if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi there, this is Jeremy Knutson. I'm an associate principal that works for operations at the middle school, as well as supports our 8th grade staff and students.
Hi, I'm Nicole Coronado. I'm the 7th grade associate principal, and I also oversee school improvement, culture, and equity.
Hi everyone, I'm Erin Miller. I'm the 6th grade associate principal at Ames Middle School, and I work with special education as well as our curriculum reviews.
All right, Valerie, we want to introduce Valerie Nyberg, our new Ames High principal.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Valerie Nyberg. I would like to give a moment to introduce my team. Mr. Anderson is currently on vacation, so he is not able to join us, but I know that our new associate principal, Nicole Patton, is on. So Nicole.
Hi, my name is Nicole Patton, and like Valerie said, I am the new associate principal at the high school.
I believe that Mr. Johnston is not able to join us tonight, but he is the athletic director. He and I are in constant contact about some of the aspects of these plans. Thank you.
I think I was just able to add Judge onto as a panelist, so he may be on here now. Judge, are you there?
A little bit, then I have a booster club meeting, so I'll do the best. Thank you.
All right, at this point, we're going to kick it over to Dr. Hawkins, and he's going to provide a bit of an overview around Return to Learn. So Dr. Hawkins, I'm going to stop sharing so that you will be able to.
Very good. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to tonight provide a brief overview. It's exciting to see as many participants and see those thoughts and questions rolling in. We're excited to be able to answer your questions. Before I get into that overview, I want to address two quick things. One, as Superintendent Reisner said, I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you. As you can imagine, the type of work that it takes to create flexible and fluid plans for environments that we have maybe not utilized before to respond to a health situation that we've never seen before is quite an undertaking. And the dedication and the work of our staff and our leaders this summer in order to prepare those details has just been outstanding. And so I want to take this opportunity to thank them. I also just want to take an opportunity to thank you. I've found our community to be very supportive in the way they've approached this in working with the school. And so I thank you for the general support that the community has shown us as well. The other thing I want to talk about before I get into that overview is when Eric was showing you the website and showing you that timeline of information, there was a link there to some survey resources. It was written in purple. And as you may know, we have sent out some surveys, some to our staff, some to our students, and some to our parents. I particularly want to talk to our parent group tonight and encourage them, if they have not already done so, to please fill out a survey for the district. We are getting those survey results directly to the buildings. It asks specific information in those surveys that prepare the buildings to best serve the needs of each and every individual child. And so obviously our goal would be to have a 100% participation rate from our parents on those surveys. We'd love to know information about any kind of needs that students have so that we can be prepared to serve those needs when they come back. So just wanted to address those points. Again, now I'll go ahead and share my screen and begin an overview of our Return to Learn plan. Hopefully you can see the screen now. Okay, so I heard Superintendent Reisner use the word nimble in her introduction to our conversation. I think it's a great word. One of the guiding principles of the Return to Learn plan that we've put together is that concept of flexibility. Flexibility both for the district as well as for parents. We know that as a district, using the metrics that Superintendent Reisner spoke about, we are going to need to be able to assess the health situation in our community as well as in individual buildings for the potential of moving from one delivery model to another. So the planning and the work that teams and buildings are doing right now is preparing us to be able to flexibly move from one delivery mode to the next. However, we also understand that families need flexibility as well. And you heard Superintendent Reisner talk about that also, that even given the mode that the district has identified as most appropriate for most kids, families may choose to have an online only learning model for themselves. And so the guiding principle of flexibility is built into the foundation of this plan, both the nimbleness of the plan for the system as well as flexible options for families. So I'm just going to describe several of those delivery models to give you an overview of some of the details within them. Again, the information that I'm providing tonight can all be found within that Return to Learn plan that Eric shared with you, but we wanted to make sure that we were presenting that information in multiple ways, making sure that our community was well informed. Certainly that on-site delivery, that face-to-face delivery of instruction for the majority of our students, that's going to be the most typical, most familiar delivery model that we have for our students. However, I'm going to go through in the next several slides some of the mitigation steps. So even that fairly typical delivery model that maybe most of us have been through and are used to with our kids maybe feel a little bit different. Actually, it will feel different coming up this next year. And I'm going to go over those mitigation steps now. So some of those mitigation steps that are going to be important to make sure that on-site delivery of learning goes safely is we're going to be providing parents information and a routine and a process for them to screen their child's health before sending them to school. This is one of the practices recommended by some of the guidance that we're looking at, that parents engage in that screening process. And of course, whether it's a staff or a student, we really don't want people coming to school if they're ill. We would need to stay in good communication about that. And there will be some screening processes that we want to teach to in order to help that out. As you may have heard already, staff will be required to wear face coverings. We are working right now to provide multiple face coverings and multiple types of face coverings, including masks and face shields to our staff members so that they have the appropriate PPE to stay safe. Students will also be required to wear face coverings to the maximum extent possible. We do have some community groups. This is what I talk about, the overall support we've received. We have community groups working on making cloth face coverings to be distributed to students. And certainly if we have families that feel like the face shield is more appropriate for their child than a cloth face covering, they can make that choice as well. But knowing that the district is planning on providing some of that important PPE available for staff and students, because face coverings will be an extremely important part of our plan. We're working with our nursing staff right now to identify all sorts of things that are going to be needed in order to keep students and staff safe and our nurses safe as they work through the health aspects of our Return to Learn plan, including the addition of additional PPE and other equipment that will be important to keep the students and staff safe. We're going to be using social distancing to arrange classrooms and common spaces between 3 to 6 feet. We're anchoring that distance in the academy. The American Academy of Pediatrics has recently released an article talking about several of these mitigation steps, and we're kind of grounding some of those decisions in that. We have no-touch hand sanitizer stations that we've purchased and will be installing in every classroom and throughout the school. They're a little bit on back order right now, and so we do have some pump sanitizer that will be put in place until we can get every classroom with one of those no-touch sanitizers installed, but those are on their way. Of course, there's lots of signage that will be going around the school to encourage people, stay home if you're sick. Here's the signs and symptoms, reminders to keep their distance, reminders of ways to wear your face covering. But then in addition to the signage, there will be lots of teaching of those routines for our students. How to wear a face covering properly, how to sanitize properly. There'll be lots of prompts and teaching around those routines. We've already talked about the idea of staying home when ill. Our teams are working on how do we stagger large environments. I know, for example, we've been having some conversations about the lunchroom and how do we maybe have students eat from a space that normally wasn't considered a lunchroom before in order to spread kids out more and create more distance in that lunchroom. It's awfully hard to eat lunch through a mask, right? So we got to have some strategies to spread people out. We are going to discontinue the use of traditional drinking fountain stations, and therefore our maintenance folks are looking at installing water filling stations for water bottles in every building. multiple of those filling stations. Again, that's in progress right now. We are going to discourage, in general, parents and volunteers from entering the building. We'll try to hold as many of our meetings as we possibly can virtually. There may be some meetings, of course, that we have to hold face-to-face, and we'll work through those on an individual basis. But in general, we're really going to try to keep that environment protected for those people that just absolutely have to be there on a day-to-day basis. Some of the other mitigation steps that specific to cleaning and sanitizing, I've already mentioned the teaching, the routines, the sanitizer that will be available in each classroom. Each night, our custodial crew will be cleaning and sanitizing the entire building with hospital grade disinfectant, focusing on those high touch surfaces, using electrostatic sprayers to make sure that even hard to reach places get sanitized. Lots of practices that our custodians will be using to ensure that our buildings are cleaned. Students and staff will be encouraged to avoid sharing of any of those high touch devices like books or laptops, electronic devices, things like that. When possible, we're going to individually label student materials so that we try to avoid as much sharing as possible. We have a process underway right now to gather and maintain inventory and supplies so that we never have a building that is out of the appropriate PPE, sanitizer, and other supplies needed to keep everybody safe. And again, that regular hand washing will be promoted and built into the routine. Again, there's other mitigation steps that I'm not addressing in this overview, but I wanted to hit on some of those highlights. Again, I would encourage, if you haven't had a chance to look at that overall plan that Eric was showing earlier, that's a great way to review the entirety of those mitigation steps that are mentioned. At least at this time, as Eric mentioned, it is a fluid plan. From a transportation department, the drivers will be screened daily. They'll be wearing face coverings. I know that there's a plan to clean and disinfect the buses twice daily. There will be sanitizer available for students upon entry into the bus or leaving the bus. We will ask students to wear a mask while they ride the bus. They'll be assigned 2 per seat. We'll obviously prioritize students coming from the same household, but then when assignments need to be made, students will remain in those assigned pairings for all trips. Again, really trying to have that cohorting concept enter as many environments as we possibly can. And then from a food service perspective, there's a number of steps being taken, including the installation of plexiglass at the main points of checkout, individually packaging each item, having those items go with kids in a plastic bag so they could be thrown away, so we minimize traffic patterns. So this year you won't see lunch trays, you won't see hard metal silverware, but students will have plastic bags and plastic silverware to use so that when done with a meal, it can all be thrown away. Again, reducing other contact there. Our food service workers will be screened daily. They'll be wearing their face coverings. We'll be taking, again, many steps. There's other steps as well mentioned in that overall plan. So again, wanted to talk about the fact that even that more traditional delivery model that we may be more used to is going to look itself pretty different than it has in past years. Again, as Superintendent Reisner mentioned, and as we've talked about a couple of times already tonight, families have options, right? So if the recommendation based upon the metrics that we have to the board is that we believe we can come back and educate all students on site, families have the option to say, oh, no, that's not what we want to do. We want to select required continuous online learning. And that would be through that process that Superintendent Reisner spoke about due August 17th. I want to be clear, we're not asking people, or we're not allowing people to select, oh, well, I want to come to school 1 day per week, but then do online other. I want to come to school 2 days per week. That we are limiting some of those choices in order to make this feasible or more feasible for our staff members to plan for the multiple contingencies that are here. But there is an option, regardless of the delivery model, that we deem is most appropriate for most kids, to always do that continuous online learning. So I'm going to describe that continuous online learning. Maybe the first thing that I want to point out about that is that it will look different than it did in the spring, particularly for those buildings that were participating in voluntary learning, such as our middle school. And so if we were to be in required continuous learning, either because the metrics indicate that's where we need to be, or because maybe at a state level, we're told we need to be there, as it was in the spring, teachers will be taking attendance. I'll go through with you in a minute what that would look like. Coursework will be graded, credits will be granted, and that online learning will consist of both synchronous live sessions in which teachers and students are interacting with each other virtually, and asynchronous sessions in which we're using some sort of a technology platform such as Google Classroom in order to put assignments and videos out there for students to work on and then turn in on their own time, maybe not so live with the teacher. Again, those synchronous and asynchronous sessions will be a really important aspect for required continuous online learning. Whether or not that's a mode that the district decides, or even for those students who choose and families that choose that option on their own, we'll be providing feedback through student work being done through asynchronous learning, and there will be synchronous or live sessions for students who are choosing that online option. We know those visuals at the bottom, we know that the importance of making sure that our families have access to internet and access to devices are two big key points in order to ensure that this is a viable option for our families. And so the district has procured over 300 hotspots, as well as worked with local internet service providers in order to provide options for families to get access to internet. And again, there's been some additional purchases of laptops, charging cords, bags, and things like that to make sure that if we were to go to required continuous learning for all students, that we have the adequate supplies in order to be able to do that. I do want to spend a few minutes talking about hybrid learning, right? So what happens if the state says, as they have in other contexts, that we really need to be operating at less than full capacity? Or what if our metrics tell us that we need to be operating at less than full capacity? We do have a hybrid option that building teams are planning towards. I'll describe it in another slide, that would bring some students to school on certain days, and then on the days that they're not in school, they'd be participating in asynchronous learning opportunities. And then you'd flip-flop those groups. Students that were maybe the first part of the week participating in online learning, later in the week they would be on site, and vice versa. And then hybrid 2, we've talked about a little bit already. That's that family choice option. That is where a family might say, whether the district is in hybrid 1 or whether it's in on-site learning, families do have that option of saying, we want to request and participate in online learning. I know a question that came up yesterday with the elementary groups was, well, what if we've chosen one and then the context or the situation changed? Can we change our mind? Can we go to online learning if we didn't initially choose that, or vice versa? And the answer is yes. We want to allow flexibility for our families, because we know just like things change for the schools, things will be changing for our community and our families as we progress through this situation. I talked a little bit about attendance and how attendance is taken. I'm just going to focus on that hybrid 1 column. So for students that are on site, attendance will be taken in a fairly traditional way. Teachers will be using Infinite Campus to record attendance for those students that are in class. However, when students are online, we will be taking attendance based upon task completion and logging into our learning platforms. And so teachers will be putting out tasks either through Seesaw or Google Classroom for students to complete. And the work towards completion and the completion of those tasks will be how attendance will be monitored for those students that are doing online learning. And then for instructional delivery, of course, that instructional delivery for in-person is maybe a little more traditional than what we have. That's a more traditional model for us that we're used to. Again, it will still look different because of the distancing and some of those practices there. We won't see as many small groups coming together. But the instructional delivery for that online will consist of both of those synchronous and asynchronous opportunities. If we're in a hybrid one situation where some kids are coming one day and other kids are coming a different day, that'll be a primarily asynchronous opportunity. In other words, not live, because that teacher's time will be focused on the students that are with them during that day. Then again, of course, for hybrid 2, attendance will be taken similarly on site as it would be for other on-site opportunities, and attendance will be taken online based on task completion. And those instructional delivery models will look fairly similar to both on-site and required online learning as well. So let me spend just a minute talking about, I've talked about hybrid 1. Again, I want to be clear, hybrid 1 is not an optional, this is not something you can choose to be in, but this would be something that the district would recommend we go into based upon our metrics or based upon a state mandate. The grounding philosophy of this is that our students with our highest identified needs should be served most regularly in situations when not all students can come on site each day. And so I'll talk about how we determine that in a few minutes. But for the most part, most students, if we were to be in a hybrid 1 model, would come like on Monday, Tuesday. AA is what we would call that. Those students would come on Mondays and Tuesdays. 50% of a grade or 50% of students in an individual class would be in attendance on site, delivering, receiving direct instruction. Then we would flip-flop the group. The students that weren't there on Monday and Tuesday would come on Thursday and Friday. The students that are at home on Monday and Tuesday would be engaged in that asynchronous learning. And then the students that are at home on Thursday and Friday would be engaged in that asynchronous learning. You can see that in a hybrid model, there is not a plan to pull students to the building on Wednesdays. Rather, this is a time where teachers will be focused on planning lessons and assessments for that online learning, providing feedback to students, grading work, making individual student check-ins, receiving professional development from buildings. And this is also a time where if there's any additional deep cleaning or sanitizing that needs to be done, that we can do that. Again, we have a team of people that have identified a series of questions to help us know, well, which students would come more than on AA or BB days. A series of questions about the types of services that they normally receive. If you're looking at that packet that's available on our website, that full plan, I believe it's on page 14 there, and I would encourage you to look at that. But there's a series of questions that teams will ask in order to determine, does this student need to come on both AA and BB days? Most often those decisions are going to be made by an IEP team working with the family to determine whether that child does need 4 days of instruction or not. But I want to point out that that is a possibility for some of our families. I know that when I was looking at the thought exchange early, one of the questions was about those metrics, right? And you heard Superintendent Reisner talk about the fact that we're currently working with a variety of community partners. Mary Greeley, Story County Emergency Management, Story County Public Health, other superintendents, McFarland, all sorts of folks in order to identify what are the metrics that are going to be used upon which to make recommendations for those delivery models. And those are in process right now. They're not done yet, which is why we're not ready to yet make that recommendation as far as the delivery model is concerned. But they are being worked on, and I'm appreciative of the fact that we'll have those in order to help make wise decisions and to be transparent about why we're making those decisions with our community. So hopefully that provides you a bit of an overview of the different models and some of the options that families have. Please let us know what your questions are so we can make sure that we're getting you the information you need to make wise choices about how you and your students come back to school this fall.
Thanks, Dr. Hawkins. And thanks for everyone who was submitting questions. We've started to go through the thought exchange, and we really have a running list of questions that we're going to start to tackle. We're going to start going through the Q&A, and in a little bit, we will start asking if anyone wants to ask a question by raising their hand. One point that I did want to just remind everyone of is that August 10 day, because I know that we do get a lot of questions on, what is school going to look like when we start on August 24? And so a recommendation will be made to the school board on August 10. And one other point about return to learn that Dr. Hawkins, he went through all these different models, and how we start school will certainly be one thing, but the reason why we were planning for all of these different delivery models is because it allows us the flexibility to move in and out of those models, not just as a district, but there is a possibility where one building may be in one model for a certain period of time and another building within our district may be in a different delivery model. And so that's why it was really important that we worked all of those different delivery models, because we could be moving in and out of those throughout the year. One of the biggest questions that we do get, and I am going to kick it over to Superintendent Reisner, is about the metrics and the protocol, and really what happens if a student or staff member does test positive for COVID. So Superintendent Reisner, you are up.
Thank you. So one of the things that I said in the beginning was keep in mind that these plans are in the works. Not all of them are complete. We have begun the work around the metrics. We are not there yet. So what I can tell you is that the metrics will include, it will include numbers, one, Story County numbers, building specific numbers, classroom specific numbers, district numbers. So we're going to be looking at a whole slew of different data sources within those metrics. And so they're just not quite done yet. My hope is that we're close, but I can't speak any more detail to those yet. The other thing that gets asked, we are also in the process of developing, that is around protocols. So when a student tests positive or a staff member tests positive, what will the protocols be? The one thing I can tell you for sure, you will be notified immediately. So we will have a process in place that parents will be notified if their student was in a classroom with a student who tested positive, or if a staff member tested positive. Of course, we have regulations and can't necessarily make reference to who that is, but we will give you that information immediately. That will come in the form of a phone call and an email. So knowing that this is pretty important information to send over email in the chance that you may not get it. So we want to make sure that we also follow up with a call. As you can imagine, that is going to be a large lift for the district. And so we're going to put processes in place so that we ensure that that happens. Another question that came up, will students be able to continue their learning online if they are quarantined? And the answer is yes. That is why we are developing these different learning models that they can go in and out of. So if your child is in quarantine, they would move to an online learning environment. And the same, would be true for if a teacher is in quarantine but not ill, that teacher would still be continuing to provide online instruction for students. So those are some of those processes that are in place. One other question that I wanted to kind of bring up was around screening students at the door. We will not be screening students at the door. We will be developing a process, a checklist for parents And then you will be screening your own child at home before they come. And that is just simply because there is not really the manpower to do that within the buildings. And most of the districts are looking at that model of really ensuring that parents have the information, they're able to screen their child. And if a child becomes ill at school or shortly after they've come to school, a parent missed something, they're immediately put into isolation and will be sent home. Same with a staff member. So if a staff member becomes ill, they immediately go into isolation or quarantine, and then they are sent home. And then that process of notification begins once we get or if we get a confirmed COVID test. One, just probably going to hit on a couple more before I turn it over. Some discussion around 3 to 6 feet versus and masks and all of those things. Those are some of those measurements that that we work with Story County Public Health on. And so we received, and I'm sure most of you have already seen this, but we received a lot of information from a lot of different sources around the goal is really to weigh the mitigation factors on whether or not you can bring students back. And if there is any question, the we are, and I guess it's national, we are really being encouraged to bring students back and take steps to try and have mitigation factors. If you can't social distance, then all students should be wearing masks. So that's where we're at as a district. We can guarantee 3 feet. We can guarantee probably 4 feet, 4.5 feet. But wanting to really make sure that not only are we using that social distancing, but we're also using masks, because there will be cases where we aren't able to social distance to the full 6 feet. That being said, you all know, I'm sure, that it's 15 minutes exposure with no mask. So we feel pretty confident that if we keep our masks on and we remain as socially distanced as possible, that will be hopefully that will be meeting the requirements that were set forth for us by Story County. In no way do I believe tonight that I can promise you that that we're going to have everything and we're not going to see any positive cases. I just can't guarantee that. But we were charged with ensuring that we had plans in place, that we developed these metrics, and that our goal was to bring students back to school. So we're going to do what we can. But I also want you to know that as parents, you are the experts. If you don't feel safe bringing your child back to school, if we are in an online learning or in a in-person environment, by all means, we will support your decision, and we will have online learning ready and available for your students. So kind of just, and also if the metrics show us that we can't open, then we would start in a hybrid or in an online model. So it's not necessarily that the decision's been made, everybody's coming back, and you as a parent have to make that choice right now. That isn't the case. I think you can see by watching the metrics in Story County what's happening, and the cases increasing, and so just knowing those things, we will make the best decision we can as close to the start of school as we can. But always we will support you as a parent in your decision. The last thing I'll touch on before I kick it over to some others to answer questions, face coverings. And so the comment came up about what does maximum extent possible mean? Does that mean they're optional? And no, it doesn't. They're not optional. They are mandatory. And we feel strongly about that. You know, the goal of these face masks is not only to protect your child, but to protect all of our other children, as well as our staff who might have conditions as well that they are compromised, and our goal is to protect everyone. Masks are mandatory. The maximum extent possible really means for those students who have sensory issues. We have students who are on individual education plans who have sensory issues. Keeping a mask on would not be possible. So for those students, we will take other mitigation steps. And that is why that terminology is in there. All right, let me kick it over. There's some questions I think that we could answer on I think I'll do a few for our principals. The first question that I'm going to pose, and each of you can answer, or you can have middle school can answer, and if high school doesn't have a plan in place yet, they're welcome to say we don't have a plan yet for that. So understand to our public that we may not have answers on all of these, but they're in the works if we don't. So the first question I'm going to pose, I think it came up on both middle school and high school, is how will PE work? And we'll start there. How will PE work?
I will go ahead and take that. Well, I will start us off, and I think that we will have Mr. Johnston actually join in the conversation for that one.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Nyberg. Right now, physical education is still under review on strict guidelines of what that can look like. And I think some of that will play into sports and activities that we're still waiting guidance on. I have been told that by this Friday or Monday at the latest, we will have guidance on fall sports and what that'll look like and what our options are. But the physical education piece of it, Dr. Hawkins has had some work or look at that. So Dr. Hawkins, do you have anything to add on physical education?
You bet. I'd be happy to weigh in. I know one of the things we talked about was doing physical education outside as much as possible, taking advantage of the space that we have around the school to be outside. I'm gonna base this next answer off the guidance that was released today around band, right? They talked about being in big spaces, spreading out, still wearing masks if at all possible. I know in some of the other schools that I've been talking to, they've been talking about creating very individualized physical education plans where students maybe aren't doing team or group activities, but rather they're engaging in a personalized physical activity plan. Those are some of the conversations that are out there right now. What that will look like specifically in Ames at our middle school and high school is, as Superintendent Reisner, is still being determined. We definitely have identified that when at all possible, we'd really like to be doing those activities outside. And from there, some more details do need to be worked out because as was said, we have not received any kind of official guidance or research base yet, but still trying to work through some creative ideas to create that space for kids.
So would the middle school like to respond to that?
So we're still waiting on that guidance as well. We met with well, at least I met with my two PE teachers, and we discussed different options to be able to provide physical education in a safe manner. But as Dr. Hawkins said, we wanted to wait for some guidance to anchor our decision on to make sure that we're providing a safe environment for our students.
So I'm going to keep with the middle school on this one since you're already on. So middle school, how will drop off and pickup look?
So we actually began the planning process for that. We have multiple entrances into our building. We're still working out the details, but what we have decided to do for parent drop off is currently our current practice is for students to enter through one door. We are going to be using multiple doors to allow for entryways into our building. We're also going to set up supervision on the outside to make sure that students are not mingling or not practicing social distancing. There's some equipment that we're going to be purchasing to help funnel kids in a straight line and be able to ensure safe entry into our building. We also, for our bus lot, identify 3 entryways. So then again, that we can promote social distancing as they enter the bus, the building through the bus parking lot. So we will have a total of 6 entries into our building, 3 for busing and 3 for parent drop off and pickup. One thing that I will share with everyone is that as Superintendent Reisner indicated earlier, on August 7th, our implementation plan will be released to the public, and all of these things that we're sharing tonight will be detailed in that plan, so that we are creating a handbook specifically for parents and students so that they understand what the expectations are and the safety measures that we're taking within our building, and even for entering our building and dismissing from our building. I will take a moment here too, just to highlight one other thing that's very important. This is all new for everyone, for our parents, for our students, for our teachers. This is not how we're used to doing school. So we are going to spend a significant amount of time in the beginning of the school year teaching expectations to our students, making sure that they understand how we are going to handle ourselves and maintain safe measures while we're in the building. And that's going to take time. That's not going to happen overnight, but we will make sure that it's very clear what's expected of our students for their own safety, but also the safety of our staff. So I know there's going to be a lot of questions surrounding safety and how do you ensure and make sure that kids are wearing their mask. These are things that I'm going to ask you all as parents who are listening to start practicing with your students or your children now. It's going to take some stamina. I've been working out with my mask and it's very difficult. I had to take several breaks. So please know that we know it's really difficult for people to wear masks for long periods of time. So we will have within our implementation plan scheduled breaks where we will be able to allow students to remove their mask in a safe manner to be able to, get some air. And those will be scheduled throughout the day in safe places in and outside of our building. So these plans are still in the works, but what I can assure you is that on August 7th, I have a very strong team on my building leadership implementation team. We are going to make sure that every detail is addressed. I am looking through your thought exchanges and the questions that you're posing right now. And so while we might not have a specific answer for you at this moment, I have been documenting it so that we can go back as a team to make sure that we're specifically addressing those questions.
Thank you. Dr. Nyberg, did you want to add anything?
Yes, I would love to add something. I want to echo what Mr. Michael said about we will spend substantial time at the beginning of the school year going over these responsibilities and expectations with students. It'll be over multiple days and would take some of our more traditional teaching time in order to provide that that time to equip kids for what we all need to be doing and how we all need to be moving about. We also, on my building implementation team, are working on trying to develop an actual video that will take parents and students through what it will look like on the first day of school. So those expectations are clear and people can see it visually for themselves before they actually have to show up. So like the middle school, we have looked at our spaces to see how many doors and entry points we have. We have, I think, over 70 doors to our building. So at this point, we are trying to limit entry and exit down to 5 primary doors with one-way markers so that students can enter in one direction and exit in another. In addition to that, like Mr. Michael said, we are working to procure some equipment to take our larger spaces where kids would commonly congregate and narrow those spaces to promote forward movement and constant movement out of that area. We will likely have likewise some supervision outside to make sure that students aren't gathering. One of the things that makes our life a little easier / harder is the amount of construction going on for the new building. So there aren't a lot of options for students to really congregate in large places like there would be in the parking lot. And we are also designating some of our hallways as one-way hallways so that we can move traffic. We might have to extend our passing period in order to help facilitate that, but we can move our traffic in one direction and not have so much mingling. But I appreciate what Superintendent Reisner said about the exposure of more than 15 minutes unmasked. So with students wearing masks in the hallways, we feel confident that we can make sure they're safe as long as they are continuously moving and getting from place to place.
Since you're on, let me ask one other thing. With limited parking, where will students go during flex time?
Well, that's a great question. We are eliminating flex time. Students will have assigned study halls rather than having an open period. That way they are, we know where they are, they know where they're supposed to be, particularly for contact tracing. That'll be particularly important. In addition to that, we are, and I'm gonna take a big breath here, we're going to a closed campus. The impetus behind that is when students leave campus, they can go any number of places and do any number of things and have unlimited exposure in order to ensure that we are trying to maintain a safe an environment for our staff and our students. We want students who are going to be in the building to be there, and when they're done being in the building for their academic purposes or activities related purposes, they are exiting at that time. I know that there will be some questions around particular schedules for students who are taking ISU classes and DMAT classes, and also engaging in some employment practices outside of school that they'll have to go back and forth. Whenever possible, we'll try to make this at the beginning of the day or the end of their day so that they can, again, have that one way you're coming in or you're leaving and not going back and forth. So there's going to be quite a culture change this coming year. And I will need everybody, all of you, to help support that culture change so that we can keep everyone as safe as possible.
Thank you. I don't know if this one is one either of you want to talk about. I certainly can. Oh no, I'm sorry. How will masks be enforced?
I'll let Mr. Michaels answer that one first.
Okay.
So I will share in full disclosure. I am very adamant about masks being worn in our building at the time. Of course, there are going to be circumstances, and I answered that in the chat feature, where due to a medical reason or a special need, that there might be some discussions that need to happen one-on-one with the building administrator. So if your student does fall into that category, please reach out to your building principals so that we can begin a discussion of how we can address those concerns. Our top priority, at least, and I can say this about everyone that's here on this panel, is the safety of our students and our staff. So we do know that we are working with young adults that are growing and learning. And so there's gonna be some moments where students might forget. I recognize that we have students that come to us with very different backgrounds, and some students, not out of defiance, but because they might have some type of impulsivity or just other cognitive concerns, that they just might need some gentle reminders, and that's a teachable moment. So we will remind students, we will tell them that they need to put their mask on. There will be some teaching, and that's why I stressed in the very beginning when I spoke, this is the time to practice. It's going to be difficult for students to build that stamina up of wearing a mask all day if they show up to school on the first day of school. If we are in session, that's going to be very difficult. So if the student is deciding, if they're making decisions that they're not going to wear a mask, then there will be some conversations that will happen in their office, and we will invite you as a parent to be a part of that conversation so we can begin to discuss what other options there might be for your child. So that's the blunt answer. Our students are old enough at the middle school and high school level to understand the importance of following this very basic and simple, straightforward rule. But we do recognize that some of our students, not out of defiance, but just out of just needing some support and reminders, will work with those students. But students who are just deciding that they're not going to do that, there'll be some private discussions that will involve the family, and we will look at options for that student to continue their learning in multiple ways that may not include being in the building physically.
I want to concur with Mr. Michael about everything he just said and add that we are working with our PBIS team to develop a very clear communication and expectation protocols for wearing masks. I think it's really important to emphasize that this is not just about the individual, but it's about the community. And this is about how we're all at risk and how to mitigate that risk as much as possible. So we are looking at this from a learning perspective in terms of, sometimes kids have bad days or they have bad moments and they lash out and they act out. So understanding what the function of that behavior is in that moment, and then making that teachable moment, giving some corrective action is something we're prepared to do. But again, if a student is just being defiant and is just choosing not to because whatever the issue is at that time, then we'll have to have a different kind of conversation with parents involved, with our student family advocate involved to help support making the best choice moving forward for that family and for those students.
Thank you both. Very well answered, very thorough. I appreciate that. I'm going to give you the principals just a quick break. I'm going to turn it over to Jerry. Jerry, there's some questions about air quality, circulation, windows, ductwork, and then kind of that humidity management, and then the temperature of rooms. Wearing masks becomes very hot. And so there's questions around those items. Would you be able to speak to that?
Yes, Superintendent Reiser, I'd be glad to. Ames is in a fortunate situation with the recent construction projects that we have completed to have HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems that are relatively new. The high school and the middle school were both remodeled and built here in 2005. And with that, there was updated codes compared to some of the previous construction at the high school or the previous construction of the middle school that provides fresh air and ventilation for the systems. We do have a maintenance program that addresses filter changes and being able to manage and maintain and ensure that that equipment ventilates properly throughout the building. So I've been looking at other options and that we can do to be able to enhance and be able to provide good cost-effective modifications or supplements to that system. And right now I'm kind of reassured that we are in a good starting position for that. So that's ventilation. I wasn't keeping track of the list.
Yeah, I made it lengthy. So yes, it talked about ventilation, ductwork, air quality, and then the room temperatures. That was maybe one that you didn't quite, room temperatures and humidity.
Yes. So we do have certain humidity controls in the newer buildings, and at Mitchell, we're providing a new HVAC remodeled area to be able to address that. And I know we're talking about the high school and the middle school, but we do have humidity control at both buildings, and that has to do with being able to manage and maintain the equipment. Superintendent Reisner directed me to here about a year or so ago to reprogram the rooms so that the room occupant can adjust the temperature setting in those classrooms. So I think that we will be able to expand that range to be able to provide for the comfort of the classrooms. And I think we can do that. Well, it takes some time because there are quite a few rooms. Each room needs to be programmed. So we can certainly do that, and we'll do that to be able to manage and hopefully support that comfort. And that's going to enhance learning. So that's what we're all about. That's our mission.
One more question, and then we'll kick it to someone else. But water fill stations, will we have those if the fountains are turned off? And will the fountains be turned off?
Yes and yes. So I'm in the process right now. We just made that decision here recently. So I've already been working on being able to get that lined up as far as being able to go to each of the buildings and provide some additional filling stations. The middle school, surprisingly enough, I completed that work here during spring break. And we went through and we provided water filling stations well distributed through the building. So that was one of the things that I was ahead of before we realized the impact of COVID. And so we are going through and being able to work to be able to get some pretty broad distributed filling stations at the high school. There already are a couple or a few at the high school, but I want to be able to remove some drinking fountains in the main areas so we can provide better access to bottle filling stations.
Thank you. And for those of you that don't know, we have a little high school being built. So no, just kidding. But we have a beautiful, beautiful high school that is being built. And so I appreciate Jerry's detail to the COVID crisis and helping us get things ready to go while still managing that project. So thank you very much for that. Going to ask Director Cousins, Darcy is our special ed director. Would you speak to how will specially designed instruction be done if we are in a continuous learning from home environment?
Yes. We are just starting to get guidelines from the state. We had our first special ed Zoom on Tuesday of this week, and we'll have additional special ed Zooms from the Department of Ed for the next 4 Tuesdays. But I can tell you that you will be having an IEP meeting with your teacher and principal within that first week or 2 of school, hopefully before school starts, if we are all in distance learning when we start school. Hopefully we'll get those meetings in before, where you will work as an IEP team and learn what's going to be happening with the Gen Ed classroom, because students are still going to be participating with their Gen Ed peers. And so you'll learn what they'll be doing there. And then the special ed teacher will be working with you to talk about both synchronous, where you're all together and with other kids who are learning similar skills as your child, and then what will be, and those will also be taped if you can't participate in the synchronous learning. And the special ed teacher will work with the general ed teacher on adapting or putting additional materials into the Google Classroom or Seesaw to make sure that our special ed students have work that is meeting their needs. For our students with more significant learning needs, as Dr. Hawkins said at the beginning, if we're in a hybrid model, we do have some guiding questions that IEP teams will go through, and other school teams for other students that will help us answer if they're coming 2 days or 4. And because we do know online learning is difficult for many of our students. If everyone is learning from home, we still have some questions to ask that we're not sure on the answer yet. If we feel like we can have a safe classroom for very small amount of students or not, but that is something we're still working on.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to ask a couple more of the principals. Principals, talk through, and I know you don't have a lot of guidance yet on this, and that's okay. Band, this has come up many times in there. So band, orchestra, choir, what those changes are. You might mention that we did put, I think, the guidance in the chat that just came out.
So I can start. So the Iowa High School Music Association just released their guidance today. And so we haven't had an opportunity to thoroughly review that guidance. We want to be able to make sure that we put that guidance in front of our experts, which are our teachers, and have a conversation with them about what's going to make the most sense as it relates to our space specific in our building, as well as the continuation of a good program. So again, that is something. I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but that is something that's going to be highlighted and detailed in our implementation plan that will come out on August 7th. But because that guidance just came out today, we want to be able to make sure that our teachers have enough time to review it and that we can make sure that we put in the right steps to and be able to inform you all as parents about what that will look like. So that's a long way of saying we don't know yet.
And I just want to add that that guidance, so there's a couple of different factors here. The research base, the University of Colorado Boulder released an aerosol study late last week, early this week, on which the IHSMA, which Mr. Michael referenced earlier, is relying heavily on for their guidance. So those two pieces of guidance and research are helping to guide our development of what our programs will look like. I do believe I can say that we do plan, like PE, to have these courses available to our students. They just might look a little different and feel a little different than they have in years past.
Thank you so much. Okay. Sorry, quick echo. Okay. Really quick, if you could speak to mental health before we go to the next, kick it over to the next person. So if both of you want to weigh in on that, and I could also start by saying, this is something that we are very focused in on right now. We know, one, students have been out of school for a long time, and they're going to come back and they're going to need additional support, and even some different kinds of support. So we're going to have to really be thoughtful on that. We have, like I said, we've been planning and talking about that. And getting additional resources. So we are right now in the process of working to secure more mental health providers that would be in our buildings, in all of our buildings throughout the district. And so that's one of the district strategies. And I'll kind of turn it over to the principals to support that.
So I think most people are familiar that we do have the TLC program at the high school, which is one of our mental emotional supports that we have already have established at our school. I will say, in addition to that, one of the things that we will definitely focus on in our pre-service education for our teachers is some of those social emotional behavioral supports that they can implement in their everyday teaching to help to deal with some of those what they might be seeing from students as heightened anxiety, uncertainty about skill sets, and just overall nervousness and apprehension about the kind of climate that we have during this pandemic. In addition to that, like Superintendent Reisner said, we will continue to offer our supports for mental health supports to our students and provide spaces for them to meet with those supports that is private and confidential. Lastly, but not least, our counselors are also part of that team to help support our students and to work closely with families to define needs and to look at options that work best for each family.
So I don't have too much more to add to what Dr. Nyberg just talked about, but one of the things that I thought would be important to add is that no matter what model we're in, one of the things that our counselors are working on are processes and systems to be able to have students access them, whether it's through online or if we're meeting in person. So that continuity of care and support will still be there. Additionally, we have outside service providers who come into our buildings who have established relationships with us prior to this COVID-19 situation to provide mental health therapy in the building. We've already begun discussions with some of our partner agencies about how to be able to provide that support even in a telehealth or virtual setting. So we're working through those plans as well to make sure that those type of supports continue. And then at least I can speak specifically to my building. We do have one subcommittee that is specifically working on social emotional behavior and mental health to design, again, a plan that's going to be shared with our public. So they are working through some of those details right now. I'm not on that subcommittee, so I haven't checked in recently to see where they're at in the planning process, but know that that information will also become public again on August 7th.
Thank you. Just two more questions before we transition. The first one is for Dr. Jones. The question is about anti-racist education. The person says it's a must, which we agree with. How will this be incorporated when we return? It does say and ongoing, but I want to stay focused on the return to learn for right now. So are you available to talk about that?
Yes, I am. Again, it's a great question. And one of the things I've been constantly saying is that when you think in terms of anti-racist education or our critical consciousness training, it doesn't matter if we're in traditional, hybrid, virtual, we're still going to be discussing anti-racist education and what do we do with those who have been historically marginalized in our system. So this is a conversation that we're constantly having. So this current situation doesn't change. We will continue our learning. We have engaged in critical consciousness discussions and learning, professional learning over the summer with our administrators, both our district and building administrators, around making sure that we are aware of this current situation that we're in. We are currently, and again, nothing that I initiated, but we have some teachers who have already been engaged in this learning around anti-racist education. They have initiated with parents, leading book studies, even currently. So I want to make sure I give a shout out to ARC, anti-racist collaborators made up of teachers. And so we will continue to engage in this learning going forward. We have a lot of plans working with our school board, working with our superintendent, and then extending this learning with our parents as well as our teachers. So again, we are just starting, and like Superintendent Reisman mentioned earlier, we have a high school that is not finished yet, but eventually it will be put together and beautiful, and we'll be walking through and engaging in that. And that's what we're doing at the ground level with our critical consciousness and our anti-racist learning. Well, thank you for that question.
All right, thank you, Dr. Jones. These have been really amazing questions. We did say at the beginning of this webinar that we were going to have an opportunity for people to raise their hands. So I would point people to the lower left-hand corner where you can raise your hand. We'll be able to see it from here, and we'll continue to monitor some of those questions this way. I did also want to take a few seconds and remind people, you know, we're not going to probably be able to answer every question today, and we understand that that can be frustrating. So I did want to take a second and remind everyone of the August 7th date. That's when our buildings will have their implementations plan ready to be available to the public. And then each building, including the middle school and the high school, does have one of these webinars during the week of August 11 through 13. So I think the high schools is on August 11, which is a Tuesday at 7:30. And then the following day on that Wednesday, the middle school will have their webinar. And so some of these very specific questions to the middle school and high school will certainly be able to be answered at that point. Superintendent Reiser?
I would just wanted to take a minute and give Judge an opportunity if you would like to talk at all about athletics.
Well, I wish I was to Friday or Monday when I have further guidance on what fall sports are looking like. We've been told that there's a big meeting on Thursday from the association and girls union to pull this together. And then we will get guidance as athletic directors, hopefully Friday or Monday at the latest. I've just heard so many things out there. It's not factual. And I don't want to comment yet until we have guidance of what fall sports will look like, even if we will have fall sports or a modified season. It's just too vague right now to comment on, but I will jump on that here later this week as soon as we get it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. All right, we don't see any questions yet, but if we've answered most of them or given some sort of answer that helped, I'm glad. I want to ask one more that maybe didn't get answered. Is there a way to request 2 households be in the same grouping in hybrid 2? I'm going to kick that to Dr. Hawkins. You've worked the most on the grouping.
Happy to take that. Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is about hybrid 1, correct? That in that A/B model, right? And so yes.
I apologize. You're
No,
correct.
you're fine. I just want to make sure that we're being really clear with everybody. There's a lot of complication to this, and so yeah. And so the answer to the question is we're going to begin the process by ensuring that families remain consistently scheduled, right? So we know we're going to have families with students in multiple buildings, and we want those families to be able to move consistently. We did get this question last night also with our elementary folks, and we really do want to be able to help accommodate those. I saw in the Q&A that there was questions about maybe the neighborhood carpools, or we work with another family, or things like that. We would love to be able to take those individual requests if at all possible. And so we're not going to say no at this time, but I don't also know that I'm ready to make a promise that for sure we can guarantee that will happen. We're going to begin with that family unit to make sure that that family unit stays there. And then we will meet as many individual requests as we possibly can. We do want to make access to school as easy as we possibly can for everybody if we have to go into kind of a complicated logistical model like hybrid 1.
Thank you. Just to touch on a couple things, there was a question in there about 6th grade Chromebook checkout. And also a question around online. If we are in an online environment, what does that mean for PE, music, band, choir, those courses? So if Jonas, if you or anybody else would like to quickly touch on that, great. I know that most of those plans are still in the works.
Yeah, so I had a discussion with the previous tech director about Chromebook. And so we have a new tech director, so I would like to visit with that individual first. I know we discussed how are we going to be able to safely hand out those Chromebooks. And so I don't have a specific answer to that, but that is something I wrote down, and will make sure that I have an answer to be able to share with everyone. And then the question about being able to participate in band, chorus, and all of that online. So last year it was through the voluntary model, but we did provide lessons through our teaching staff on things that students can work on while they're at home for band, orchestra, chorus, and PE. But that was through a voluntary model. Now that it's a required model, if we were to be in an online setting, we would probably have to look at some different ways to be able to meet those expectations. So the reality is right now our teachers are not in session. So we want to be able to make sure that we have conversations with our teachers to discuss what would robust instruction look like in an online setting if we were required to go in that model. So we're still working those details out.
So we do have one hand raised of the participants, and so we are going to take that question before we conclude for the evening. But I did want to just take an opportunity. We have two hands raised, so we will take those two questions before we conclude. But I did want to thank everyone for coming on today. I think we maxed out at 259 participants, and that's really amazing to have that level of engagement and have these types of questions and really have this conversation around what school will look like in the fall. Again, we know there are a lot of additional questions that do need to get answered, and we're going to be working to answer those. But I just wanted to thank everyone again for being a part of this webinar and really being engaged with our community and our students. So we're going to take these two questions. The first one, Chris, you can go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to know what, if any, mitigation work is being done on the air filtration systems in the high school and middle school, given the WHO's recent turnaround regarding possible aerosolized transmission. In other words, is filtration, does it exist, or is it going to be upgraded to MERV 13 or other sorts of virus mitigation standards for recirculating air?
I will kick that to Jerry. I will say that the guidelines that the school districts have received have not included anything about air filtration systems. And so I do want to point that out before Jerry gets started.
Thank you, Superintendent Reisner. I'm involved in a couple of groups that is reviewing and addressing these concerns. So I'm aware of the suggestion by different sources to improve the filtration or upgrade the filtration to a MERV 13 or 14. And one of the challenges I have faced is there's a supply and demand. So there's somewhat of a backlog on upgrading the MERV to the MERV 13. So we do have a maintenance program that we do go through and address inspecting and changing the filters and checking the belts, greasing the bearings and so on in each one of our air handling units, as well as providing filters in classroom units where they exist. Also looking at a couple of other options for being able to address some improved filtrations. So I need to be able to get the information gathered up and be able to assess that and make good decisions and choices on that. But in the meantime, we do have filtration systems in both the high school and the middle school, and we do have a structured maintenance program that we do address those.
All right, we will take one additional question with their hand raised. Adam, you are up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Alrighty, I'm Adam Wolf, an Ames High senior. If we're on a mode of learning where family choice is made, or where most of the students are going back to school 5 days a week, will Ames High School remain on the block schedule that we use, modified block schedule that we used last year, or will there be a different scheduling system? How will that look?
Hi, Adam. This is Dr. Nyberg. I will just go ahead and say, if we are in a on-site learning 5 days a week, we will continue to have the modified block schedule. If we go to the hybrid, we will have a full block schedule for those classes at that time. Does that help to answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Okay, I know there are still some questions maybe in in the Q&A that we didn't get to. We will definitely get those questions and include them in some communication that we do. As always, you are more than welcome to shoot your questions to your building principals, myself, Dr. Hawkins, any of us that can help answer questions, we'd be more than happy to. So again, thank you very, very much for taking time to be on here tonight and get some answers. And hopefully there were some provided, and we know there's some that are still in the works. But we sure appreciate our community's support and just the kind words that people have been sharing. Very appreciated. So thank you all, and thank you to our staff for taking time to be on here as well.